Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. I'm really excited about what I have to share with you today. So I was reading last night. I got this book, and I think I've shown you before, but I actually started reading through it, and of course I didn't start in the front. If there's a book I'm really excited about, I tend to look in the contents and pick whatever is at the forefront of my interest at that time, and I'll just dive into the middle of it. Which, as I turn it, look at what I did. You see this? Look at what I did to my poor new book. I I have a little basket in the front passenger seat of my Jeep, and I keep all my books and my notebooks and all kind of just various stuff in there. And so I had an extra bottle of water or cup of water, and I just put it in there, and it tilted over, and so it just yeah. But it's okay. I can still use it. And but the content that I was reading was just super, super interesting. And it's the most time I've ever spent really trying to absorb anything from Carl Jung. And it's cool too, because look, this book was edited by Joseph Campbell, which we've looked at one of his books too. So I thought that was cool. But so today, essentially, we're going to be talking about the gift of connection, okay? And I want to go ahead and open with that title, and it's going to take a little bit to get to that point, but that's what makes it fun, I think anyway. So let's go ahead and dive in. So what we're going to be doing is, as we're reading through this book, I'm going to read a little bit to you. We're going to be looking at some behavioral patterns from people who are stuck in toxicity, okay, who live that way, like narcissistic, manipulative type characters. We're going to be looking at their behavioral patterns. And it's kind of like we know how they are, and we often speculate how they are, and it's not that we're wrong, but what I read just gave me a lot more insight into the why, and I think that's important to do from time to time, so that if there are, because here's how I view this. Let me just go ahead and say, it's kind of like, through my personal experience, if I don't fully understand something, I may try to fool myself into thinking, okay, I've got enough information on, why somebody did what they did to me or whatever, that I can accept it and be okay with it. But it's almost like we, and I don't want to speak for you when I say we, but this is me, okay? I've learned that in order for me to truly release something, like fully, you know what I mean? Because I think you can release things like hurtful things from your past. I think you can release them without fully understanding. Just if you understand enough, that's enough to release it. But yet, I think that anytime we find ourselves kind of going back in our mind, and we're like, why are we doing that? Like ruminating. It's like, why am I doing that? And it's not because you miss an abusive person from your past or something like that. That's not why your mind goes back to these memories. So it's kind of like, why does it do that? And my theory is it does it because there's more to learn. Like that higher self, that higher version of you is intentionally bringing these things back to the forefront of your mind, because there's a lesson to learn. If you look at this life through the lens of just the theory of going through this life experience as a human for the purpose of growing and developing our soul, our higher self, then it makes sense why this would happen. This dynamic where, things that you want to put behind you and that you feel like you have put behind you, why they keep popping up. Well, that's the reason, because there's more to learn. You haven't really got it yet. You know what I mean? Like that big aha hasn't happened yet. It hasn't just clicked. So that just made a whole lot of sense for me once I realized that. And so that's what I hope to offer to help in getting those wheels turning for you, so that that can happen for you, So this is just another lens we're looking through today to try and understand why some people do the things they do, okay? And if you do recognize anything in yourself, anytime through any of my videos, I assume that if you're watching my videos and you're sticking with it and you're not triggered, you're likely on the path of wanting to grow and improve yourself, and that right there is proof that you're not a narcissist. You know what I mean? Because there are certain people, like narcissistic, manipulative people, who don't want to grow and learn because it benefits them to con others and to lie and to live a lie. So, but anytime, if there's something that just kind of pings inside of you, like on a personal level, well, just notate that, and just understand that that's your higher self, or through the Christian lens, the Holy Spirit inside of you, just wanting to get your attention to teach you a lesson, to help you grow. It's that whole iron sharpens iron thing, like within yourself, between your higher self and you. So it's like all good. You know what I mean? It's all good. All right. So let's go ahead and look at this. So what I'm looking at is chapter 6, which is called, and I don't know if I'm going to say this right, Aion, it's Aion, and then it's called Phenomenology of the Self, and that's the title of chapter 6, okay? So we're going to go ahead and read in part 2 of chapter 6, called The Shadow, talking about the shadow. And you've probably heard of people talking about shadow work, So I was just really intrigued. I'm like, I think Carl Jung may have been like the first psychologist to coin that term, if I'm not mistaken. If not, then definitely the first to break it down. You know what I mean? So let's take a look. But I'm pretty sure he's the one that coined that term. All right, so the shadow. I'm going to read a little section here. I've got so much highlighted. It says, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. This act is the essential condition for any kind of self-knowledge, and it therefore, as a rule, meets with considerable resistance. Indeed, self-knowledge as a psychotherapeutic measure frequently requires much painstaking work extending over a long period. Closer examination of the dark characteristics, that is, the inferiorities constituting the shadow, reveals that they have an emotional nature, a kind of autonomy, and accordingly an obsessive, or better, possessive quality. Emotion, incidentally, is not an activity of the individual, but something that happens to him. I thought that was really powerful. Effects occur usually where adaptation is weakest, and at the same time they reveal the reason for its weakness, namely a certain degree of inferiority and the existence of a lower level of personality. On this lower level, with its uncontrolled or scarcely controlled emotions, one behaves more or less like a primitive, who is not only the passive victim of his affects, but also singularly incapable of moral judgment. So this is heavy stuff. I mean, it was for me. And I just encourage you, if that's calling to you, if you're finding value in that, just go back and listen again, or better yet, get the book. So I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit more. And I want to point out one thing before I move forward, and that is where it says, when emotions are happening to us and how it affects you, that adaptation is key. Okay, and where he's talking about where adaptation is weakest, it reveals the reason for the weakness. This is where it's like things... emotions triggers, right, can reveal a part inside of us that is unhealed or something that needs to be examined and grown. A part where development may have been arrested. You know what I mean? And so there's those of us who want to learn and grow, and then those who don't. And so I just, adaptation is important, and being able to adapt. And I just want you to pause for a moment and realize that you may have developed qualities that are less than ideal going through psychological abuse, but I want you to reframe that through the lens of giving yourself credit for being able to adapt the best way you knew how in the moment to survive. You know what I mean? So just give yourself, instead of condemning, because like I really shouldn't have, reacted that way, or I shouldn't have XYZ, fill in the blank. But the point is, I just hope that you can recognize that effort, and it was probably all unconscious, but wow, look at how you adapted in horrible situations and experiences. You adapted, and so give yourself credit for that. Maybe it wasn't ideal, but you learned. So there is a silver lining, okay? So let's go ahead and move forward and read a little bit more. And I just ask that you really put your listening ears on. I had to read through this several times. All right. Although with insight and goodwill, the shadow can, to some extent, be assimilated into the conscious personality, experience shows that there are certain features which offer the most obstinate resistance to moral control and prove almost impossible to influence. These resistances are usually bound up with projections, which is going to be the heart of our discussion today, okay? Projections, which are not recognized as such, and their recognition is a moral achievement beyond the ordinary. While some traits peculiar to the shadow can be recognized without too much difficulty as one's own personal qualities, in this case both insight and goodwill are unavailing, because the cause of the emotion appears to lie beyond all possibility of doubt in the other person. No matter how obvious it may be to the neutral observer that it is a matter of projections, there is little hope that the subject will perceive this himself. He must be convinced that he throws a very long shadow before he is willing to withdraw his emotionally toned projections from their object. Let us suppose that a certain individual shows no inclination whatever to recognize his projections. The projection-making factor then has a free hand and can realize its object, if it has one, or bring about some other situation characteristic of its power. That's like explaining how people stuck in this muddy, messy situation of self-denial, denial of that, of their inferiorities or incompetencies or the areas they need to grow, whatever they deem as a weakness. This is explaining how they create chaos, right? Or just confirming that they do create chaos as a means of projection, just another tactic of projection, right? Like the whole world is crazy or whatnot, and I'm not saying that's actually not true, because sometimes it does feel that way to me too, but yeah, when he says that, I thought that's exactly what he's talking about, how people create chaos, right? When he says, or bring about some other situation characteristic of its power. Right, bring about a situation. They're doing it. They're creating the chaos that they're complaining about, or the drama. It says, as we know, it is not the conscious subject, but the unconscious which does the projecting. Hence, one meets with projections. That's why they're disconnected and they can't see they're doing it themselves, right? Hence, one meets with projections. One does not make them. The effect of projection is to isolate the subject from his environment, since instead of a real relation to it, there is now only an illusory one. Projections change the world into the replica of one's own unknown face. So when a person is doing the projecting, it's like his point is that they're putting those unconscious aspects that are actually deemed bad in some way inside the person, they're putting those aspects out into the world so that they can create distance, right? Like, I don't identify with that at all right there, even though other people are looking at this person going, you're exactly like that. So it's just a way to fool themselves into believing that, I'm not that way, because they view whatever this is as subpar or bad in some way. Okay, so I hope this is making sense. And I had to really sit with this and absorb it. Maybe it's processing a little bit easier for you. All right. So then it says, let me see here. I have a lot I want to share. Yeah. It basically, he goes into talking about how this creates a dream world, right? Yeah. Or actually, what he's saying is, it says, in the last analysis, therefore, they lead to an autoerotic or autistic condition in which one dreams a world whose reality remains forever unattainable. In other words, these people may wish for things in their world to be better, but they never will be. They'll never be attainable because they're the ones seeing it as bad, because they're projecting those bad aspects of themselves out there, right? It's a fantasy world that's negative. All right. Okay. He basically says that this vicious circle or cycle that they're caught in is one where isolation is intensified. Okay. And I just want to back up real quick and say, I feel like everything with psychology is on a spectrum, because none of us are perfect, and none of us, we all have a conscious and an unconscious, and we all experience things that affect us and all this, right? So it's a spectrum. And that's where I just hope that you don't latch on to, one or two qualities you may see in yourself and just slam a label on yourself as a bad person. Because again, to me, the difference is a person who's working and trying to learn and grow and someone who's not. Okay. And we really do receive like this internal beautiful shift of power when we are able and strive and want to own our own issues or our shadow, right? That's what gives us that shift of power is accepting. It's acceptance, right? And at the same time wanting to grow. And I want you to keep, in the next part that I'm going to read to you, I want you to keep this concept in mind, because my note says, I'm sorry. I'm going to read my note. This is actually in reference to something I've already read. We'll talk about it. So I wrote, the case for iron sharpens iron. So yeah, going back to what I said, it says no matter how obvious, it may be to the neutral observer that it is a matter of projections. That's why iron sharpens iron is important, to be able to point things out in those that we love, in a loving manner, ideally, so that they can see, they can learn and grow the things that are actually unconscious in them. You see what I'm saying? So in that regard, I think we kind of do need each other, but we need to be real careful with who we allow into that space and whose opinion and input we actually value and allow to affect us. We have to be very discerning there. But yeah, it is important. That's why it's important. Why the Bible talks about, iron sharpening iron and how that's a beautiful thing, because we do have things that are unconscious to us, that need to be made conscious. All right, so let's go back to this next section talking about isolation intensifying, right? Just distance that's created through projections between this person and what they think is the world and everybody else out there, when really it's just their own shadow projected onto the world, right? There's just this growing isolation. It says, the more projections are thrust in between the subject and the environment, the harder it is for the ego to see through its illusions. A 45-year-old patient who had suffered from a compulsion neurosis since he was 20 and had become completely cut off from the world once said to me, "But I can never admit to myself that I've wasted the best 25 years of my life." It is often tragic to see how blatantly a man bungles his own life and the lives of others, yet remains totally incapable of seeing how much the whole tragedy originates in himself, and how he continually feeds it and keeps it going. Not consciously, of course, for consciously he is engaged in bewailing and cursing a faithless world that recedes further and further into the distance. Rather, it is an unconscious factor which spins the illusions that veil his world. And what is being spun is a cocoon, which in the end will completely envelop him. I wrote wow. I literally wrote wow after that. Yes. So the problem here is, and this is where you can start to connect some dots with regard to forgiveness, like self-forgiveness, and how that is really needed, not to self-convict. And you can start to understand what it means, like through the Christian lens of the price being paid through Christ for our faults and our sins, or our shortcomings, our errors, our lack. You could just go on, and you could put so many different lenses on this, but I hope that you get the message here that it's a matter of accepting and being able to forgive oneself, so that you're not forever trapped in misery, really. A very destructive, self-destructive, and unhealthy life. It's like you have to let it go, like that song in Frozen, let it go. You know what I mean? There will always be people to judge you. There will never be a shortage of that. Even if you're a really upstanding, truly good person, somebody's going to find fault in you. So, what does it matter? As long as you are doing your best and you're truly trying to learn and grow, and you're willing to admit your shortcomings, so that you're not constantly stumbling and caught in your own web of deceit. And there are always others out there who are happy to help you spin that web to self-elevate. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to give you the lens from both sides, if you're recognizing any of this in yourself, and also because this is like the essence of victimhood. A victimhood mindset is how I view this. What we just read is like the essence of that. And so I've got reminders popping up on my phone. But this is what, to me, this is also that, ideally a healthy person would be able to recognize this and learn and grow from it. But a narcissist is going to latch on to this and take it to the extreme on the spectrum in an unhealthy manner, and fully buy into their own projections, like hook, line, and sinker, and then just create like just more and more misery and destruction for their self and others. It's like on the extreme end of the spectrum. Okay, so all right. Yeah, they just become more and more self-righteous, right? More narcissistic as that space grows between them and the rest of the world. Okay. And this breaks down why, like if a narcissist is projecting onto you, then it breaks down all that we talked about. It's why that they make us out to be the villain. Always. And they're always the victim, All right, so what is the goal? What is the goal of a person who is living this way, who is caught up forever in a life of projections, right? What is the goal of that mechanism within the psyche? Okay. The goal proposed is to try and absolve oneself from the guilt of their sins. This is my proposal, okay? Try and absolve oneself from the guilt of their sins or their moral deficiencies, all right? And the more darkness they participate in, then the more blame shifting, denigration they thrust onto others. And it's just a matter of separating themselves, like self-denying those parts of themselves to the extreme, because they just they won't absolve themselves from guilt. And if they could just do that, then they could there could be that marriage, within the psyche of this wholeness, this union that would complete them, that would give them this deep breath of relief, like I'm okay. You know what I mean? All right. They could just simply admit that they're imperfect like the rest of us. And then again, there's the offer through the Christian lens to receive the gift of the price paid by Christ. And it's interesting because you think about why it's said that Christ came to set us free. Now that suddenly makes sense. You see what I mean? To be free of this kind of stuff right here we're talking about. But no, we must bear our cross first to get there, right? Or admit our own imperfections. So these are just all lenses to look through. I hope it's getting the wheels turning for you. All right. So let's talk about some tactics that narcissistic, manipulative, abusive people use to drive more and more distance between themselves and others. Let's talk about the tactics. And as we do, I want you to be thinking about this, all right? Consider this. It's like they're jealous of the fact that you can empower yourself, all right? And they want this too. They want to be able to do that. But because self-empowerment comes from the self, a higher self, or the higher power, if you have those beliefs, right? Who have deemed you as forgiven, then they're stuck in this destructive cycle, trying to achieve the same thing. They're trying to achieve what they see in you, because they see in you that you have this confidence, this self-empowerment, and they want that. But since they're not going about the same way that you did to achieve it, then they're trying to go around the world to achieve the same thing, and it can't be done. It can't be done that way. That's why they say happiness comes from within. All right? So they do this. They try to achieve this same thing they see in you because they're jealous of you by both diminishing it in you, bringing it down a notch in you, all these different tactics too we're going to talk about, and also trying to get others to value them at the same time. All right, trying to get that validation from others. So what are some of the tactics? Well, there's tons and tons of videos and channels that cover this stuff, but let's just hit a few here. Talking over you, never understanding you, always forgetting what you said, always trumping your story with their own, patronizing you, and I'm specifically talking about these things through the lens of what we just talked about, where they're trying to bring that self-empowerment, that light they see inside of you. They're trying to dim that, right? So, like, for example, if you have some good news and you're sharing it with them, they're going to be like, "Oh, that's so good for you," like you're a baby. You know what I mean? That's like an example of patronizing. They'll walk off mid-sentence. Just walk out of the room. They walk ahead of you, not beside you. I'm talking like obviously ahead of you, where people won't even know you're together in a store. And then again, causing drama and chaos, or just power shifting continually to elevate themselves, right? And these are experiences I've had. Some of, right? So their efforts are always geared towards putting you down or in an inferior or subordinate role, or elevating themselves, right? I mean, there's just a plethora of tactics that they use, and it truly does create when you're stuck in some kind of connection with a person like this or relationship, it's agonizing. It's a miserable experience. And it's strange, and I can say this from experience. It's like on some level you see that this person, even though they appear, it's confusing to you because they appear to be very confident. But there's like this deeper knowing inside of you thinking, you feel so sorry for them. You see that they're truly miserable. And you try, like, what's wrong? And they're like, nothing. Or just they're in total denial. Their entire life is one of denial, okay? So, all right. So I put, what is the goal of these behaviors, like what we just talked about here, okay? So there are two lenses we can look at as to the goal, essentially, of projection, right? First would be the spiritual side, that the message is that being kind and having love in your heart is weak. That's what they want you to think, okay? Because the darkness wants to destroy the light, because the contrast that you display in just how you live exposes the lies embraced by those living in darkness. This is what constitutes what's referred to as the spiritual battle between light and dark. Okay? Your essence of like, how dare you go around empowering yourself, embracing joy. Like, how dare you? You know what I mean? Like, that's their mindset, because it's exposing the fact that they're not doing that they're stuck in darkness. So that's one lens. The other lens as to why they do this is to prevent true connection. And this goes back to what we read in the book, creating that distance between themselves and any and everybody else, right? Except, distance like here, you know. They want to keep people close that they use and abuse. So not like actual physical distance, but like it's preventing true connection, like a heart connection, right? They're doing anything and everything they can to prevent that connection, because they have to keep the distance within themselves from who they want to be and what they perceive as bad traits or qualities or sin or shameful aspects of self. They have to keep that distance within themselves, and they do that through shooting these qualities out onto you, a scapegoat, or the whole world, or whatever it is, and separating themselves like, oh, that's horrible and awful. That way they can actually acknowledge it, but they acknowledge it externally and not internally. Okay, and because they do that, it's this constant distance they're creating. Like the book talked about isolation, it's a cocoon. So preventing true connection. Now here's where I want us to implement something I've talked about before, and that is understanding, this is truth, but also they're scraping the sand down there. I hope it's not too loud. Hang on, I'm going to pause it. Okay, so this is where I want us to try something. It's a practice that you can implement in every aspect of your life, and it is truly life-changing, and I say this from firsthand experience, okay? So this is where you can frame all of these truths that we talked about today. I believe them to be true. They resonate with me as making sense enough to be true, right? A lot of this is theory when you're talking about how the human mind works. But if this makes sense to you and it resonates and you're like, this sounds true, this is how you can think about, in the end, like the top thought, the main thought, takeaway, the main aha. Is to say, the good news is their world doesn't have to be your world. Their world doesn't have to be your world. You don't have to be a part of, you don't have to play along to appease these people. And I know as an empathetic person, it is sad. It is very sad. And that's why, when you think of this through the lens of burying the living dead, I mean, that's tough stuff. When it's a parent or a sibling or a cousin that, you were close to, or you tried always to be close to, and then one day you realize that person will never be able to be close to anyone, a spouse. It's tough stuff. But I truly don't believe a person is honoring the higher power, God, the Creator, by forfeiting and just sacrificing their own life for what they feel like is helping a person, when in reality it's not helping them. You see what I'm saying? This is where it's like, there's a reason for that term tough love, because sometimes you just can't help, you can't help it, like for example a child, without there being consequence. Consequence is important, and as long as you're staying entangled with a person like this, you're enabling their projections. That's what you're doing. You're not helping. You're actually just perpetuating it by engaging in this role that they want you in. So that's what is meant by tough love on this level with regard to what we're talking about. The best thing really you can do is to leave, both to preserve your own life and also to shake things up for them so that they have an opportunity, and they'll probably have multiple opportunities in their life to come face to face with the truth and accept it. And that's where it's sometimes referred to as the crossroads, right? Where here they are again faced with a choice to admit they're not perfect, just like the rest of us, and be okay with that, and that may mean going through an avenue of a spiritual practice, like accepting the price paid, through Christ, through His sacrifice. And I'm not minimizing that, by the way. It's just that, I have my own beliefs, and I respect others who are learning and growing, even if they have different beliefs. You know what I mean? So when I say things like that, I'm never wanting to force my beliefs on my audience. I just don't want to do that. So, but I do want to at least mention it. So, but just know, if you are a Christian, that I'm not minimizing that. It's just, some things are our pearls, and some people, just we're all on different paths. We're all on different paths, and I have respect for you if you are trying and learning and growing, no matter what path it is. You know what I mean? But my point is, there comes a point where, someone like that who's living a lie, probably multiple points on their path, where they can choose, like when a person leaves to save their own life, for example, which may have been you. Well, then they're faced again. The scapegoat is gone, and their Band-Aid is gone. And they're faced again with the truth. And it's a chance. It's another chance for them to repent, would be a spiritual term, or to just face the truth and accept it, and stop self-convicting. So, if we don't frame these kind of really hard things through a good lens, then we can find ourselves like just wishing it all in, just wishing for the sun to supernova or something like that. It's like, just get this whole world over with, this experience. I'm done. You know what I mean? We can find ourselves in that kind of a frame of mind, and that's not good. So I try to always look at be strong enough to face truths both out in the world and in myself, and feel the feelings and honor all the emotions, which I thought that was an interesting thing he was talking about there in the book about emotions, but yet frame it, wrap it up in a positive manner. It's not that I'm fooling myself, it is true, but it's just that lens of hope and faith, you know. So that's what I hope for you too, to look at it this way, that these people will never be able to have a true connection with someone, but you can. You can. That's the good news. And that's beautiful, right? And their world does not have to be your world, and you don't have to be a part of that world, that false world that they're creating to pacify themselves, right? To prevent themselves from facing hard truths. All right. So, when you don't participate in their world, then you can enjoy the freedom, right, of being the always learning and growing, yet perfectly imperfect, true you. That's the beauty, the freedom, right? Okay, so I think I've covered everything. Let me take one last look here at my notes. Yeah. And so, yeah. And it's beautiful too when you can find others who are also committed to learning and growing, because those are the ones that you can share. You can share the gift of true connection with. You know, so there's others out there. So I encourage you to put the focus where it belongs. You know, learn and grow about these things. Connect dots, bring some puzzle pieces together, give yourself some ahas, and wrap it up with the positive lens, and know that life can be beautiful, and there's no need for you to sacrifice yourself. And there's just a double benefit from walking away from toxicity. You know, the benefit of giving them another opportunity to truly come face to face with hard things and heal, and also saving your own life, and being able to embrace peace and joy, and finding others, you know, your own kind, that you can also embrace peace and joy with, and share true connection with. So thanks so much for listening today. I hope this has gotten the wheels turning. I hope that it's left you with some aha moments, and that it's brought you some clarity, I hope, and some encouragement and inspiration and motivation. So thanks again, and I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you very soon.